When we think about pastoral counseling, a lot of us probably picture someone trying to find just the right Bible verse for a specific problem. But what if truly effective counsel isn't about a single verse at all? What if it's about understanding a deep, powerful structure that underpins everything? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore.
It really all starts here, with the absolute building blocks of the text, these ancient letters and words. So the big question is, how do we possibly bridge the gap between this ancient code and the really complex anxieties and wounds of modern life? How do these characters speak to our need for healing and wholeness today? That's what we're digging into.
So, here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the DNA of meaning hiding in the text itself. Then we'll get into the neuroscience of why stories are just so powerful. After that, we'll look at what I'm calling architectures of belief, see how this all works in a real counseling session, understand the crucial safeguards needed, and finally get to the ultimate goal, building a coherent life.
All right, let's start with the absolute foundation. When it comes to using scripture in counseling, there are two fundamentally different ways to go about it. One way seeks real precision, and the other settles for something called proof texting.
This slide really lays out the two big approaches. On one side, you've got proof texting. Just grabbing a verse that seems to fit and slapping it on a problem like a Band-Aid. But on the other side, there's disciplined interpretation. And this means doing the hard but essential work of understanding a passage's original genre, its historical setting, and its grammar. One's a quick fix, the other is about understanding the soul of the text.
Now this is where things get really fascinating. A huge portion of scripture isn't a rulebook, it's a story. And it turns out there's a profound scientific reason why narrative is so incredibly powerful. It literally shapes our brains.
Get this. Research from a Princeton neuroscientist named Yuri Hassan has shown that when one person tells a story and another person listens, their brains literally start to synchronize. The emotional and cognitive parts of the listener's brain start firing in the exact same patterns as the storyteller's. It's called neural coupling. Stories aren't just sending information, they're transmitting entire experiences. It's incredible.
And this moment from Genesis is a perfect example. It is just thick with tension, family drama, fear, deception. You can almost feel Jacob's anxiety, right? When we read stories like this, we're not just tracking plot points. Research shows these kinds of character-driven narratives actually cause our brains to release oxytocin, which is the neurochemical for empathy. These ancient stories are basically neurological tools that have been sharpening our ability to understand each other for thousands of years.
So if careful interpretation gives us the true meaning of these powerful stories, and the stories themselves actually shape our brains, how do we organize all of that into a stable worldview? Well, that's where systematic theology comes in. You can think of it as building a coherent framework from all the Bible's teachings, an architecture for our inner world.
Now, to really understand why this architecture is so vital, let's look at a problem that psychotherapy has identified. The psychoanalyst D.W. Winnicott talked about something he called the false self. It's basically this protective shield we build when our environment feels unsafe or doesn't respond to our real needs. It's that part of us that accommodates, that pleases, that performs, and it often leaves us feeling hollow and fake inside.
And this brings up a massive question for all of us, doesn't it? When we feel like we're just reacting to the world, living behind this defensive shield, how in the world do we find what's authentic? What gives us the stable ground to stand on so our true self can actually emerge?
This is exactly where that theological architecture comes in. A systematic theology takes all the Bible's teachings about God, humanity, and hope, and it organizes them into a coherent whole. So instead of hiding behind the reactive shield of the false self, this stable architecture of belief gives our true self a reliable, solid place to stand, one that's grounded in something much bigger than just external pressures.
Okay, so we've got two powerful tools: careful interpretation and coherent theology. Now, let's see how they come together to create a counseling approach that goes way, way beyond simple, quick fixes.
The difference here is all about depth. So imagine someone is struggling with this crushing chronic guilt. The simplistic approach is to just hand them a verse on forgiveness. But an integrated approach connects that forgiveness to a much richer theological framework. It talks about what it means to be declared righteous, that's justification. It talks about being in a process of growth, that's sanctification. And it talks about being welcomed into God's family, that's adoption. This isn't just about changing behavior, it's about deep, lasting transformation.
And to really get the danger of getting this wrong, check out this powerful analogy from sleep science. Studies have shown that when we're sleep deprived, our emotional regulation just breaks down. We snap.
We lash out with inappropriate anger, not because we're terrible people, but because a fundamental system in our body is offline.
And that's the point. Counsel that doesn't have the discipline of careful interpretation and a coherent theological framework can be just as damaging to a person's soul. It's like a surgeon trying to operate without understanding anatomy. Good intentions just aren't enough. Precision and structure are absolutely essential to avoid doing serious harm.
And this leads us straight to our next point. Because these disciplines aren't just about being effective, they are absolutely crucial safeguards that protect everyone involved in the counseling process.
Okay, in the world of therapy, there's a well-known risk called countertransference. It sounds a little technical, but it's really about when a counselor's own unresolved issues or emotions get triggered by the person they're trying to help. And if they're not aware of it, they risk acting on those feelings, projecting their own stuff onto the person seeking help.
And this is why having a disciplined approach is such a vital safeguard. By grounding the entire process in careful interpretation and sound theology, it places both the counselor and the counselee under an external authority. It's no longer just about the counselor's gut feeling or emotional impulses. This structure helps resist manipulation, and it forces humility, reminding the counselor that they are a steward of God's truth, not the source of it. Which brings us to the ultimate goal of all of this. What we're really doing is reframing the entire purpose of counseling. It's not just about solving problems. It's a form of discipleship that's aimed at building a truly coherent life.
Think about it like this. The goal isn't simply to patch a hole in the boat, to solve whatever immediate crisis is happening.
No, it's about teaching someone how to navigate the seas. The real aim is to move from short-term crisis intervention toward long-term, deep spiritual formation. We're talking about shaping a whole life, not just fixing a single problem.
And this is so cool because it brings us right back around to the power of story. Cognitive science tells us that narrative is how we organize our memories and make sense of our lives. A coherent story helps us understand where we've come from and where we're going. So the ultimate goal of this deep, integrated counseling is to help people find their own personal story within Scripture's grand redemptive narrative. That's what gives them a profound and coherent sense of self. So, we'll end with this question for you to think about. When you really look at the patterns in your life, the beliefs you hold, and the choices you make, what story is your life building? And is it a story that's coherent, resilient, and whole?